Welcome back, and thanks again for tuning in to Keeping Ag Real. Today's guest doesn't fall too far from my family tree. Anyone that knows us, including our mother, will be quick to tell you that we're near polar opposites. I think that's a fair assessment. Growing up, my sister Heather was always blonde and lived through some horribly awful teasing by somebody. And I've spent the most of my life as a brunette because I wanted to kind of cover up my grays. I decided that I was going to start going blonde. And without consulting one another, I didn't realize she was going to also become brunette. So we are now total opposites in our hair colors as well. So, in today's conversation, I'm springboarding off of last week's interview, which was with Natasha Nichols. If you didn't get a chance to listen to those interviews, please head back over to iTunes. There's actually 2 different separate episodes from Natasha that are just outstanding. Natasha is an ag advocate, and she's a speaker and a blogger and a mom of 4 from Chicago, and she's got some really great perspective to offer. In today's interview, the goal is to further provide those outside perspectives from people who are not in agriculture. Please welcome my non-farming, city-dwelling sister Heather. Hey.
Hello.
Welcome to my podcasting world. You don't know much about this world.
I do not know. I am not quite the tech junkie that you are.
I don't know about that. Well, let's just talk real quick. We'll be kind of brief on our diverse backgrounds and why our backgrounds are different. There's 6 years difference between us. Our mom is a molecular and cytogeneticist of corn. Do you remember all of the time that we spent out in the field at Funk's?
I do, because I loved the sun at that point.
And we always were in the crick, you know, and then as we got older, and if you're a new listener, you can go over to the website keepingagreal.com and you can read kind of a more in-depth version of the story. But in a nutshell, I was able to go to work for a neighbor who was also working in a nearby field from where our mom was working. And I started out in plant pathology for Funk's G. And I had absolutely no desire to live in the state of Illinois. Certainly, I was not going to end up in central Illinois. And when I graduated high school, pursuing an agriculture degree was absolutely not on the radar. And here I am, 40 minutes from Funk's farm, where we grew up. And my kids are attending the same school that we went to, and I absolutely love it and wouldn't want it any other way. But because you were younger, you did go to work for Funk's when it was Ciba Geigy. Is that right?
True, yes.
At that point, because I went Funk's, Ciba Geigy, Novartis, whatever, I can't remember the path, but whatever today is Syngenta, is the history behind Funk's. And after high school, you had no desire to do anything with agriculture and pursued other opportunities. What's your wheelhouse? Share what your expertise is.
Well, so currently my expertise is focused around assisting corporations adopt the philosophy of operational excellence. By no stretch of the imagination, a new concept. However, it definitely is something that a lot of companies that are adopting right now. Essentially what this means is helping companies to understand that each and every employee at every level has value. And once those employees can have a combined vision of how that value flows to the customer, this allows for minimal breakdowns in processes and procedures. And the hope is that this will increase the products provided by the company in question. I would say that it's as simple as, retail companies, gas stations, restaurants, and I believe that really has to do with the continuous evolving needs of the customers.
Our careers are quite different, as well as our lifestyles, and that doesn't exclude food choices. Can we agree to be civil, at least? Will you be nice to me? Don't embarrass me in front of my listeners.
I suppose. I am always nice to you. Don't make blonde jokes.
I can't anymore.
I know.
Ha, ha. So we'll begin the conversation about food choice by talking about food buying decisions. And I've kind of put together some different questions. And what this is supposed to do for you, Heather, is help others that are in farming, ranching, agribusiness, grocery retailers dietitians, all of the people in all of those wheelhouses understand different perspectives from those who are not connected to agriculture. So here is the first question. Where would you say is your go-to store for purchasing groceries?
Ideally, my first choice is always going to be locally sourced produce from available farmers markets. Unfortunately, during the winter months, we don't have a lot of access to that. I have, over the last few years, gravitated more towards Aldi. I feel that they've gotten a lot better in their produce choices.
Actually, I was just talking about that.
The price point is something that you certainly can't beat, and I think everybody focuses on that right now, and probably will continue to focus on. Outside of Aldi's, my second go-to choice is definitely going to be Kroger. I'll admit that a lot of that goes along with the branding piece. You constantly see their ads, on TV, you hear it on the radio, but also they really try to give a lot of value, I think, to their shoppers.
I would agree with that. Your comment about the produce at Aldi's, a friend who is on Twitter, I'll shout out to him, Conrad Smith. We were just talking about that the other day. Another friend had put out a poll about green grapes versus red grapes. Hey, there's a question. What do you prefer, red grapes or green grapes?
Red grapes, for sure.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yes, and they're great frozen, too.
Yes, that's exactly what I said. And so strawberries, and Wyatt eats that stuff even now. He'll put them in there.
Uh-huh.
He'll make little kebabs. So, okay, so Aldi's and Kroger. So here's my beef with Aldi's. Even though I do shop there, that's one of the primary places I shop. When I go into our store and I look at the potatoes, I look up for the price, of course, and what does it say? Locally grown. Then I look at the package. They are from Idaho. That is not locally grown. And if you look through a lot of their produce, that's not anything unusual. They've got Michigan apples. They've got, cantaloupe that's from Arkansas. That's my beef with Aldi. There's another podcast episode with Gracie Weinzierl, and we were talking about Aldi, and I think we're going to come back to that subject in a few weeks or a month or so.
Here's what I find with Aldi, to your point, is, yes, you look up and you see a sign that says locally grown. And so as you start to look, depending on how they are focused on what I do, which is operational excellence, they may or may not be rotating the products as they should be. So you can sometimes find produce under, the potatoes that will say they did come from somewhere in Illinois.
But we don't grow potatoes here.
That's what I don't understand. Where are they grown?
There are some pretty big hubs in different parts of the country. There's some out on the East Coast, Southeast Coast, like Georgia, definitely Idaho, North Dakota, Missouri. I know that there was some out in Washington, because that year that I came out there and I drove across the state and I did my ag tour across the state by myself, I found potatoes out there too.
What about greenhouses?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that. I just don't think that it's something that is grown on a production basis here in our state.
I would agree with that.
And so, okay, so what is it, we've talked about what we don't like about Aldi's. What is it that does appeal to you? The price point?
The price point is definitely going to be a big piece with me, but, as I said, I think that the actual value of the products that they are bringing in is better than it ever has been. And I think that they also listen to what a lot of their customers say, because I don't know about your experience, but here in Bloomington, you do constantly see a shift in the different types of vegetables, fruits, and additional items that they shift around.
That's a good point. And Kroger, you already kind of talked and touched on that also.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the types of foods that when you do go to the grocery store, what is it that you buy? Because the last time I was in your kitchen, I think there were rice cakes and fat-free milk, and I don't even remember. I think some kind of fruit or something, and that was it.
It's been quite some time since you've been in my kitchen, because I actually no longer drink milk. I do get a lot of vegetables and a lot of fruit. I'm a huge fan of sweet potatoes and green apples, and I definitely like that with ham. I also don't eat a lot of meat anymore. I don't really know what kind of happened bouncing from coast to coast, but I just don't seem to have an appetite to have a lot of beef or to have a lot of chicken.
But when you come here, you've got beef, you've got chicken, you've got pork, you've got goat, you've got duck.
And hidden squirrel on occasion as well. Did you forget about that barbecue?
No, we're not going to go in depth. People don't need to know just how hillbilly we are. But you're right. I think I'm going to cut that out.
I would say, honestly, when I do eat meat, it is when I come to your house. There's a little bit more of that trust factor, though. I kind of know a little bit more about where it comes from, and that is something that's important to me, is knowing where things are coming from.
And why don't you drink milk?
I honestly just outgrew the taste of it. If you remember when we were younger, I would drink a gallon of milk every couple days. Just as I've gotten older, things change, and I just can't handle it anymore. But now when I even try to drink it, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, which is pretty terrible.
What kind, or what percentage of what type of milk, or would you have drank?
If I did, the last I drank was skim milk.
See, and that's like water compared to the vitamin D, which is actually only 3 to 4% fat versus the skim milk.
And I've never been able to do vitamin D. It just seems too thick to me. I don't know why.
You do know that I buy half and half, and I pour half of a glass of half and half, and then I take the vitamin D milk and pour the rest of the top part of the glass with vitamin D milk.
But I don't drink it, so.
But it's so good. It tastes so good. So meat, let's go back to the trust factor. I was curious if that was the reason you didn't drink milk, but it's not. So let's go to the trust factor on meat. So if I've got a friend in Whiteside, Illinois, who has beef cattle. 85% of the beef that is consumed in the state of Illinois is actually grown in the state of Illinois. So if I were to introduce you to Allison and her family, would that affect your choice or your trust level?
I would say, yeah. I still have additional reasons why I don't eat a lot of meat, mainly for my own health benefits. I know that having natural proteins and things like that are important, but I do like to stick to primarily the fruits and vegetable aspect of food, which is a little strange. I understand that.
And why is that?
For me, my body reacts better. I have a lot more energy, and, one thing that I think is never really talked about is the effects of food on your skin as you get older and your hormones change. I think that there is a piece to that. What it is all about, I don't honestly know. I'm not mom, so I don't fully understand all of that. But, I know personally for me, I have certain things that I've tried. I've stuck it out for 30 to 60 days, and I have seen a difference. One example is I primarily drink only water. I don't drink a lot of sodas. I don't drink a lot of juices, things of that nature. And it does have
beer.
And that. And it does have a strange effect on me, and it makes me feel sluggish too.
You're right, alcohol does.
Ha ha.
See, and I would like to see the research and how that affects your skin, because I have to have meat. I have to have red meat because I'm so anemic. And not having that iron affects my skin and has aged my skin faster because I don't have enough iron, because my colon, if you're a new listener and you're listening, I have Crohn's disease, and my colon has problems absorbing certain nutrients and things. And iron is one of those. The lack of iron being absorbed in my body has caused my skin to age faster. So I would be interested in reading the research saying that a plant-based diet is better for your skin.
I wouldn't say that it necessarily is. Years ago, I used to eat very, very different. I had very little meat within my diet whatsoever. It comes down to, I think everybody is different. I think something that works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. What really drives that, I honestly couldn't say. I've tried a lot of different diets for a variety of reasons over, I would say, the past 10 years. And what I finally figured out was I don't read any more studies about which diet is best and what you should or should not do. And I stick with what works for me and what I like.
Amen. I like that approach. We agree on something. Huh. Who would have thought it?
Surprise, surprise.
Okay, now hold on here. Next question. Did you or did you not bring organic apples into my home on Christmas?
Thing number 3 gets what he wants, and he wanted a specific type of apple, and that's all they had. So, yes, they were organic.
They're the Honeycrisp. The Honeycrisp apples.
Yes, Honeycrisp.
I was like, what the heck? Did I pick up the wrong bag? Because we don't.
Nope, that was me.
We do not. We prefer to feed our family non-organic. And if people want to feed their families organic, that is absolutely fine. Just don't take away the choice that we have and our preference of non-organic. Just because it says it's organic doesn't mean that it hasn't been treated with some type of pesticide. In most cases it has. It's been treated with a different type of pesticide than the non-organic. And the reason the non-organic, and this could be applied to all kinds of different foods, is these chemicals were developed so that it was safer for us to eat those foods because those original chemicals are so bad for you. Along the way, that story just didn't get told. And that story needs to be told. But that is why we choose not to purchase organic food. I was confused when I opened the drawer and I'm like, what the heck?
And it's funny because going back to trying out different diets, I did eat straight organic for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Not only was it kind of a boring diet, because there's lots of things that you're, told in various studies. You shouldn't eat this because of this reason. You shouldn't eat this because of this reason. And these chemicals are bad for you, and these chemicals are bad for you. What I found was, one, I just wasn't able to have the types of foods that I really wanted to eat at the times I wanted to eat them. It was very expensive, and frankly, it was always one new study trumping last week's study over and over and over again. And It was something that you had posted on Facebook a few years ago about the whole organic discussion. And what was hilarious to me was you and I being very different and having very different ways of looking at things. You were able to put it in a more simple fashion that I could actually understand. And yet we have all these people with PhDs that can't seem to drill it down to a fine, this is why we say it's better.
That's a very good point. Okay, well, let's move on to, we're going to play a little game, and it's a word association game. So I'm going to read you some words. I have not let her see these words. They're not part of any preparations that we've done. I want you to provide your first gut response. Are you ready?
Okay, go for it.
Family farm.
Necessary.
Container gardening.
Urban necessity.
GMO.
What is that?
I'm asking you.
That's my response.
Oh my gosh, we cannot let Mom listen to this. Ever.
I know what it is, but the studies are just way too in-depth, and I don't have that much time on my hands to sit down and make an informed decision because there's just too much information.
Okay, fair enough. Corporate farming.
I'm not sure.
Vegetables.
Delicious.
Artisanal.
Fad.
Whole foods.
Not worth it.
Awesome. Hey, we agreed on some of those. Okay, now you don't know about this part, but I have a quiz, and it's going to make you actually think, and the thing that ticks me off is I can't make fun of you for being a blonde in this situation, where I normally would. So,
but I can for you.
Yeah, my feathers were ruffled. The first question is, I got to make sure that you know what I'm talking about, I guess, first. So there's this little butterfly label, and it says non-GMO. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, it's on my peanut butter jar.
What do you think of when you see that?
Branding. Honestly, I don't fully understand the whole GMO stance. I'm sure there's an argument on each side. However, you know me well. I can be very skeptical of a lot of things, and I'm not completely sold that it's not just another method to upsell products.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that it is on a container of peanut butter. What is Clayton allergic to?
Peanut butter.
Peanuts.
Peanuts. Yes.
Is there a peanut product on the market that is genetically modified?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would say I don't have enough information to know that.
It's not. There isn't anything that's on the market. What is happening, and it's actually having some difficulty getting off and running, they are taking and cutting out the allergen is so he could eat peanut butter. But because there's so many opponents to genetic modification, there's been difficulty in getting funding for that research to make that actually become reality. So that is one example of how it is beneficial and it could help.
Which is totally asinine when you think of the fact that they spend money on determining that one glass of red wine a day is comparable to exercise. I mean, the type of research that we have out there is a little bit ridiculous. For me, I think for something that is that crucial, when allergies of that nature can actually cause severe harm or death, I think it's ridiculous that we wouldn't be able to find money to research that.
So here's the next question. How many foods which have been genetically modified are on the market and available for purchase?
I'm just going to throw out a number of 21.
9.
I do not know.
9? 9. There's not genetically modified wheat, doesn't exist. Genetically modified milk doesn't exist. Genetically modified carrots, I'd have to double check the list, but I don't believe they exist. There are only 9 foods that have had any type of genetic modification done to the genome. Crazy, huh?
I guess I just don't understand if there's benefits from completing those types of modifications that ultimately can make the lifestyles of, individuals better. I guess I don't understand why that's not something that's talked about a bit more.
Recently, this fall, apple, it's called the Arctic apple, is now on the market. I think it's in everywhere in the U.S. now. And it has been genetically modified so that it doesn't brown. Do my kids want to eat brown apples?
Of course not. They
No.
perceive them as bad.
Exactly. So at school, when they cut up the apples, and they're cut up 20 minutes, 25 minutes before the kids come through the line and get them, what happens? They brown. Then
it
what
gets
happens
wasted.
Exactly, food waste. So this Arctic apple has now been created. I was able to test it before it was on the market about 2 years ago. And it will help reduce food waste, but it's also going to help increase nutrients in kids' diets because they're going to eat that fruit. So there's so many good stories out there that people are trying to tell, but unfortunately a lot of times the minority that's out there is the loud part, and they're telling the opposite story, I guess. The last question, which you had mentioned in the beginning of the interview, you said buying local is important to you. Why is it important to you?
I understand not only what that means to those farmers that I buy from, but also to the community. In my eyes, that's putting money directly back into where I live, I thrive. It goes into the some of the restaurants that I go into. Anjou Above is a great one. They use all locally sustained food from Epiphany Farms. The food is always delicious. What I do know is that I have friends that are financially supported, not just by Epiphany Farms, but also through other local farms. As a result of that, I feel more comfortable giving the money that I work hard for to people that I have some sort of connection to. It's your decision and your choice.
What about a friend that's growing rice out in California? Is that wrong?
No, not at all.
So is locally the only way to do it?
I would say no. I think it's going to depend on what your own values are and what's important to you.
Wow, we're agreeing on things.
Right?
And we're not fighting, and we're being civil. I'm kind of disappointed. The listeners are going to be disappointed. I think they're expecting a fight.
Well, you're still blonde, so I can always go on you at that.
Oh, boy. Well, what questions do you have for not only me, but maybe someone that is growing something totally different from what's on our radar here?
I can't really think of any. The only question that I would have that comes to mind is, what are people doing to try and get more about agriculture worked into elementary schools?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. Do you know why it's a fabulous question?
Because you're working on something for that?
Yes. We are going to have an Illinois garden at the grade school this spring. And we're going to grow the main crops that are grown in the state of Illinois and teach the kids about those crops and the difference between field corn and sweet corn and the difference between jack-o'-lanterns and food-grade pumpkins and things like that. Thank you. Did you know that?
I think it's...
Did you plug that in intentionally?
No, not at all. That for me, no joke, Jenny. It comes from living in larger cities and seeing how our culture has shifted to this instant gratification paradigm that everybody wants what they want when they want it without having to put the work into it. I think that there's a lot of value in helping children understand not only where their food is coming from, but how to be self-sustainable. I think it's crucial that people really do understand that, the world does not revolve around walking into a store and instantly getting what you want. I just definitely, I feel that there is, not to separate out farm kids from, city kids, or as Wyatt so cutely called me one time, what would he call me, an urban light or something like that?
He did?
I can't even remember. Yes, because I said I grew tomatoes in a pot.
I wonder where he learned that.
I would love to know where he learned it because I thought it was from you.
No, I don't really use that word ever.
Wait, was it a city light? It may have been
light.
city light.
All
city
right.
light, yeah.
Okay, folks, we've got a new term that we can use. City lights.
Yeah, city light, because I grew tomatoes in a pot.
City lights are container growers.
Yes. So, I think that there, in my experience and from what I've seen, there is a very distinct difference in the amount of hard work that you see among kids that have grown up on a farm, kids that grow up learning how to be self-sustainable. I think there's a very distinct difference in how grateful they ultimately are for each and everything that they accrue in life. But that's my opinion.
And I think just starting younger, that's going to help efforts so much more than trying to, sit and talk and convince someone who already has ideas set in their mind because that's what they've believed for 20 years. Why not just start young? And I guess that was my whole philosophy with this Illinois garden, because we had extra space that we needed to fill, and that's something I've wanted to do for some time now. And now that I've had a career change in the last year, I've got a little bit more extra time to do things like that. So yeah, I think starting young is a good way to talk about food. Not only food, but also, corn goes into crayons, it goes into glue, it goes into diapers, it goes into plastic. Soybean goes into plastic. In the 1930s and 1940s, Ford Motor Company began using soybeans to create the foam inside of car seats, the seats that we sit on, and they continue to use it today. There's so many different things that crops go into that people just don't realize. And that's a big story that really somebody needs to hit go on. Start talking about that rather than just food, because the food discussion is like religion anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point because, I think it was you and I had this conversation a while back about, corn going into crayons and things of that nature, and I didn't know. I mean, what do I know about a crayon, right? So, well,
I'm sorry. You are kind of an artist.
Yes, but I use paint. I don't use crayons, and I don't have any small children to teach to use crayons. So,
what color is the hair underneath that brown?
This is all natural, thank you very much, because I've chosen to go against the norm and not color my hair. I'm embracing my whiteness.
And folks, thanks for joining another episode of Keeping Ag Real. If you have questions for my sister that you would like to pick her brain and get her opinion on something, please feel free to tweet those to me. Thank you, Heather. Seriously. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For letting me pick your brain and let people understand some of the perspectives that are out there. Because you know what? We don't know what we don't know.
Right. Yeah. And I
it.
am a firm believer that always ask questions so you can learn a different perspective.
All right. Well, our time is up, and you can go to Keeping Ag Real to find the show notes. You can also find Keeping Ag Real on iTunes, Spotify, and it should be up on Google Play this week. In addition, a new part of Keeping Ag Real, we're no longer just a podcast. You can also go to YouTube, and you can find the episodes on YouTube. If you're a person that wants to sit and work on your computer and play the episodes on the computer, you can do that. Ooh, which means I need to go dig through some baby pictures and get some pictures of you to put on your YouTube episode.
Oh, what a great idea, Blondie.
I'll call Mom.